أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
بسم الله.
قال رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. First, I want to thank you for allowing me to be a few minutes late today. My wife actually had spine surgery Friday, and they were supposed to discharge her yesterday. They kept her till today. I literally, got her settled in at home, and I said, okay, I'll be back. I'm going to run to Miami and back. But alhamdulillah, my mom, her sister, my sisters are there. I'm pretty much useless at this point, but she's been really, really supportive of, our collective work for social good. Let's see if the projector pushes. It says loading. Alhamdulillah. I don't know if there's any doctors here, but she had C5, C6, C7 removed, artificial stuff put in, plate put in. But alhamdulillah, she's good. Ameen. Jazakallah khair. So I live in Orlando, Florida. I am a native of Florida. Some of you might know my father, Dr. Tayyab Yunus from ICNA. So I was born and raised in the Panhandle, and went to the University of Florida. From there, ended up in Chicago. Spent most of my adulting life in Chicago, and somewhere along the way, I founded an organization in 2002, a social enterprise, and this organization now is a global corporation, and alhamdulillah, it runs on its own, and its mission is to improve the human condition, and how it does that is by folks who can't get a job, who can get a job, and got kicked out, or they worked for the corporations and that sort of for-profit lifestyle wasn't for them. They come to our corporate orphanages where we do professional development and then eventually do job placement. And so today that corporation has over 500 employees worldwide. And that was because when I was in high school, my father said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, I wanted to be an Islamic worker. And he said, well, if you want to be an Islamic worker, one day you need to get yourself financially sound so you would not be under the influence by by nafs or any other financial influence that may come about. And so somewhere around 2015 or so, when I got to that point where I said to my dad, Dad, I think I'm finally there now. The company's doing well and I'm financially sound and I want to go make the world a better place. And he said, well, think about one problem you want to solve and focus on really trying to solve that problem. Don't try to do too much. And let's see, is it coming?
Yeah, I'm trying to reset it.
That's okay. And so at that time, as I looked across the American Muslim nonprofit sector, this is 2015 or so, what I found out is that the American Muslim nonprofit sector, the bottom line is that it is severely anemic. Meaning, Al-Hibri, which is a foundation in Washington, D.C., it says that out of the 5,000 registered known American Muslim nonprofits by the IRS, there's an estimated additional 3,000 not identified as Muslim for a total estimate of 8,000. Of these 8,000, 90% of them have less than $200,000 as an annual budget and less than 2 employees. The other 10% have more than that, and therefore these 90% will not have enough resources to fulfill their mission or to succeed at their mission. How many of you have experienced what is maybe called donor fatigue? Yeah? You guys? Yeah? Yeah. So I sort of, at that point, went on a mission to think about the question my dad gave me, which was, what problem do you want to solve? And are we alive? Not alive yet? Almost? Coming. Okay, inshallah. So I'll just keep telling stories until the slides come up. So I sort of went on this journey to look for that problem I wanted to solve, and what I arrived at was, it's the good news is we've got a lot of American Muslim nonprofits in our, mashallah, in our community. We have masajids, we have Islamic schools, we have so many new nonprofits. If you go to any Ikna or Isna or Mass or Ummah convention, these are the sort of the 3-4 largest ones that are out there. You go into the bazaar and you see booth after booth after booth, and you see these, mashallah, these young professionals, these elder brothers and sisters as well, these community builders who've been at it for 20, 30 years, or maybe even just a year, and yet the sad part is we know that they're going to struggle with resources.
We're having some kind of issue with your iPad. Can we
use his computer?
Yeah, we can. We can switch over.
Do we have the file? Do you want to?
It's. Oh, we're.
You had to bang it a little bit.
We're going to bang it a little bit, huh?
Yeah.
So that's why you shouldn't use iPhones.
All right.
PC guy, huh?
Yeah, but South Florida's a PC.
No, I'm a Mac. Do you want to use a USB to drop your file here?
Let's try one more time. Oh,
Yeah. Hold on. Let's see if it works.
No.
probably too much resolution.
Lightning use this, or you can drop your own USB.
So this is Google. Can we log into Google Cloud here?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay, let's try that. Oh, wait.
Oh.
I'm just not gonna go into presentation mode. I'm just gonna leave it like this and slide down the left. Is that okay? We're short on time. Real quick, the purpose of this, in the next few moments, what I'm gonna walk you through is some of the research that's happening in the American Muslim community. What this research, it's my understanding that this room is filled with the leadership who's leading the American Muslim community in South Florida. Is that a fair assumption? Okay. So I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a president of a few nonprofits. I'm the CEO of a global company. And when you're at the top of the organization, for you, it's about product market fit. It's about who's the person that you're serving, and how do you want to serve them, and how do you want to make their life better. And so if you're at the top of your organization, which you are, this is the top of the organization, you're the leaders, mashallah. You're the community builders, mashallah. You're the heroes and sheroes. I have 4 daughters. They love it when I say that. You're the sheroes. And so since you're the sheroes and heroes, you want to not be just thinking about the American Muslim community today, but you want to be thinking about where is your sort of constituents. When I use that word constituents, it means those you serve. It means your donors. It means the participants of your services. Constituents, it includes all of them. So your constituents, you want to know where are they going, right? So a couple of things. Real quick, very obvious right now, the best estimate is there's about 3.5 million Muslims in the United States. This research is by Pew, P-E-W. You can find this. Sheikh Google will bring it up in a minute if you wanted to find it. And inshallah, if you want this later, I will share this deck with you as well. A couple of things though that's happening, we know this, we may not know this, but the arrival of immigrants is dropping. That's basically what the next 2-3 slides say. That how many immigrants are coming into this country is basically dropping. Okay? Again, you can find this anywhere you want to see it. So if you have an institution, which you do, then you want to think about, I'm just going to reference my father as an example. Okay, my parents, 1968, 69, they landed in New Jersey. My dad did his internal medicine residency, then he did 3 fellowships until my mom said, that's enough, let's get out of Jersey, it's freezing. And then they landed, mashallah, in North Florida, right by Panama City Beach. Many of us know Panama City Beach, great community there. That's where he landed. And so then he had us, 8 children, right? So immigrant, dad, first American born were his children, and my children are second American Muslim born. I'm just going to use myself as an example to bring this data to life. Doesn't necessarily mean what I say about my dad represent his views and opinions. Okay? So, again, this slide is essentially showing us a massive decline. There was legislation in 1965 which made it very easy, mashallah, for immigrants from around the world to come. And after 1965 is where really the influx happened. And some of you may know this about me, some of you may not know this about me, but I did 6 months as the CEO of ISNA from December to Ramadan of this year. And my job at ISNA for 6 months was to dig in and find a way to repurpose ISNA, to rebrand it and relaunch it and reteam it. So I did a 6 months project over there. And one of the things that was interesting as I sat with many of the elders, the community builders, I call them community builders. We're standing on their shoulders, and many of the community builders in this room, whom I stand on their shoulders, and my children and their children will stand on their shoulders as well, inshallah. May Allah bless the community builders. And these community builders, when they landed in 1965, at that time, the American Muslim, we were right in the middle of the civil rights movement. And so ISNA had to become this umbrella. We needed these umbrella organizations. We needed these connections and resources to sort of start up the organizations that you see today. But now what's happening is many of the immigrants are not arriving anymore, right? So you, as leaders of your organization, what you want to do is think about your market segments. You have an immigrant market segment, and there's nothing wrong with that. And you have to think about services to meet their needs. But what you also have is your first and second generation market segment. ISPU, the Institute of Social Policy and Understanding, their 2017 American Muslim poll says that first generation born children of immigrants that are now between the age of 29 and 45, 20% of them are saying they're not a Muslim anymore. None, N-O-N-E, right? So what I'm trying to get you to think about is, think about, if you want to be effective with strategy, don't think all the Muslim community is just one big blob and one size fits all. When you sit down to create strategy for your organization, you want to think about the different market segments. And don't think about the market segments that you're serving as just youth, sisters, brothers, elders. You got to be a little bit more specific with your products and services. And if you think more specific about your organization's products and services, you will broaden your constituency base, and you will tighten the relationships with your donors, right? This talks about how most Muslims say that they're subject to discrimination. We know that. This talks about how there's a growing population of black Muslims as well. And it should help us think about markets that we need to be serving and markets that we need to be reaching. If you're on a masjid board or you are a masjid leader, what I hope I can get you to think about today is think about the answer to this question, which is who you serve. Who are the personas that you serve? Rather than thinking about, oh, this is just our community, and make assumptions and have bias about them. You'll be more effective as a strategic leader if you think about your. The next slide is actually very interesting. The share of Americans who leave Islam is offset by those who become Muslim. So 20 to 23% are leaving Islam, yet 20 to 23% are converting to Islam. Right? So you as an organization, you want to ask yourself, do we want to address this? Do we want to build a convert program? Do we want to address the bleed? When I showed this to my mom, she was like, Allah's going to replace those, right, with another group who will. But that's Allah's plan. Our job is to look at the data and create strategy and do our best, right? So think about your market. Think about your organization. By the way, I'm an adjunct faculty at Indiana University's Lilly School of Philanthropy, where I teach fundraising and fundraising strategy. I was blown away when they told me there's no such thing as donor fatigue. And I was even more blown away when the professor said it's not donor fatigue, it's called donor abuse. And I was enlightened when I learned how you address donor abuse and how you strengthen your bonds with your donors. If we have time today, inshallah, my third presentation is on fundraising strategies. We'll see how far we get. Former Muslims now say they have no religion. I don't know if that's good news to you or bad news, but they're saying none. I'm not a Muslim anymore. I'm not in the club anymore, but I'm neither Christian, I'm not Jew, I'm just nothing. Right? 22% are saying they're Christian, 21% are saying I'm something else. But 55% of those leaving Islam are saying I'm none. Right? Millennials are half of Muslim adult population. This is interesting. So if you are an American Muslim community center, you've got a masjid, you've got an Islamic school, maybe you have janazah services, whatever you have, you want to be thinking about this growing millennial population. You can't ignore them. And you can't continue to do what you've always done. One of my professors and mentors, Dr. Shadiq Siddiqui, he said, right now we are at the largest transfer of wealth the American Muslim community will ever see. Because those immigrants who came in the 60s and 70s are now passing away and passing on their wealth. And if we, the American Muslim communities, do not have a strategy for planned giving for this transfer of wealth, then we're missing out on opportunity. If we do not reinvent our strategies for fundraising, right? So millennials are coming. So the good news about millennials, by the way, you'll hear me later on say that they are philanthropic, they are charitable. 60% of US Muslims are not attending weekly. If you were to take all the Jummahs in South Florida, I don't know where you guys consider South Florida, maybe, what's the? Palm Beach. You take Palm Beach South, and you take every single masjid, and you take the fire code occupancy number, and you just add that up, you're still only serving 40% of the American Muslim community from Palm Beach down. So it means we're not reaching the other 60%. And that's kind of sad, but I like to think it's exciting. I like to think, you know what, there's 60% of people out there we're not reaching, and I want to reach them. You know what else is interesting? The data says that of the 10% of the nonprofits that have more than $200,000 of a budget. So if you're in this room and your organization has more than $200,000 in an annual budget, you're in the 10% club. Right? If you're less, you're in the 90% club. You've got an anemic problem. You know, when you don't have iron, you're anemic, right? So if you have less than 200,000, your organization is anemic, right? If you have 10% or more, you're not anemic, but what the research says is 5 to 8% of the American Muslim community is actually actively engaged and actively supporting your organizations. But they're getting ready to pass away, a lot of them. So you want to have a strategy to address the shifts in your market. That's all I'm trying to tell you. My objective is to open your mind and to help you see the data, to help you think about the power of data, and to help you think about markets, and to help you think about shifting your strategies. There are prescriptions to these problems. Okay? For all the doctors that are in here, I grew up in a medical family, so I use some of that language. But there are prescriptions to these things that I'm mentioning. So this is interesting also. most American Muslims, I think this is obvious. There is more than one true way to interpret Islam. However, 52% of them are saying, someone needs to go reinterpret Islam so it makes sense to my life. Someone needs to reinterpret it. So the prescription, I was mentioning this in another group of leaders, that it's not about doing tafsir again, for example, but rather having open, comfortable, safe space conversations about how to make Islam applicable and practical and sensical in the lives of this first and second generation American Muslim that are growing up. That's all it means. That's all it means. So there are prescriptions to this. Only 24% of American-born Muslims 18 to 29 are saying they're very happy. But they're still least likely to report that they smile or laugh. When I saw this, I was kind of sad. I was like, if we have the hadith that smile is sunnah, why aren't we smiling more? Right? So then the other part is young adult American-born Muslims are reporting the highest levels of anger, sadness, and worry. And this was measured against young adults in other faiths. So if they measured Muslim youth 18 to 29, they measured Christian youth, Jewish youth, and the Muslim kids are basically saying, I'm not happy, I'm stressed, and I'm often angry. The prescription here, the simple prescription here is let's turn up the volume on Jannah in our masjids. Let's just turn up the volume on Jannah. My sister is a marriage and family therapist. And one of the things I heard her say in a talk, and this was her words, and I thought it was pretty good advice, is she was saying that guilt, and she said guilt is a terrible motivator, right? And she was talking about the psychological journey and how guilt is only effective after there is the tremendous presence of love, right? When there's a profound presence of love, then drops of guilt work. Right? But if you're often going and talking about using guilt as a motivator to inspire a changed behavior, then you may risk rejection. You may be inspiring hate and anger. This is simple. 3/4 of U.S. Muslims are immigrants or the children of immigrants. You can look around. It's okay. Closer look at Muslim giving. This is research done on Muslims and giving. Right? We use this data to create strategies for Muslim nonprofits and for our fundraising workshops that we do. So this data basically surveyed American Muslims and sort of asked very simply, who do you give, where do you give, okay? And to no surprise, and dug into what is the true motivation of giving. Those with more should help those with less, right? Which causes are important to American Muslims? Mashallah, still house of worship is still 89%, right? To no surprise. Domestic poverty, what's interesting about this is the light blue color is outside the faith community. The light blue color is outside the faith community. So that means my son is donating, he's going to donate to the house of worship, mashallah. He's going to donate to his masjid. He's also donating to domestic poverty, but there's an 81% chance that he's giving it outside the Muslim community, right? So what this means is if you are a masjid and you have a domestic poverty solution and a program that solves that solution, you have to up your communication game, you have to up your efficacy game, you have to up your stewardship strategy, okay? And going on and on, education, mashallah, many of the established masajids, you have Islamic schools. So that's part of your education program. What's interesting also is when giving outside their faith community, most Muslims give to domestic poverty. Muslims are most likely faith group to donate to domestic poverty outside their faith community. Restated. I'm going up. Okay, how much do American Muslims spend? Turns out that 43% is giving between 100 to 999. Giving USA is is research that's done by Indiana University every year, and they research all giving in America, which is roughly $430 billion. And Americans on average give $2,700 a year. So what this means is Muslims are giving less than the average American. Muslims are giving less than the average American. So the average major gift is 10,000 or more. Just two quick comments. Muslim women are more likely than men to give outside their faith community to overseas relief efforts and youth and family services. So what this means is that if I'm an overseas relief organization or I have an overseas relief program, then I need a strategy to be meeting with Muslim women. Right? Maybe it means hire a female to do fundraising if that's part of your policy, or it means reaching, phone calls, whatever that strategy is, but it means Muslim women are giving outside the faith community to youth and family services. And I'm pretty sure most established Islamic centers have a youth and family services program. So if you don't have a strategy to engage and involve Muslim women, the sheroes, you're missing it. I have to keep throwing that out there. I have 4 daughters and 5 sisters. Yeah, alhamdulillah. All right, young adults. I used to hear and I used to believe that these millennials are so into themselves, they don't donate, they don't care. Turns out they're philanthropic. Actually, overwhelming research says these millennials and the generations after them are very philanthropic. They're very charitable, right? So they give more than their non-Muslim counterparts in the same bracket. So my son, Muhammad, he's 19. If his buddy, Joe, for example, this data says Muhammad's giving more than Joe, right? 65% contributed inside, 55% outside their faith community, 62% to overseas relief. So mashallah, that's a good thing. That's a really good thing. These millennials, man, I'm hopeful. I really am. We just have to think differently. We have to think open-minded, and we have to think strategically and think about efficacy. And then you'll have a much more, inshallah, effective program. And you'll see that your halls and your programs and your donor lists are being transformed as these generations, mashallah, move on. You'll fill your halls and fill your donations, inshallah, with this growing new population. If you can think about strategy more appropriately and effectively, inshallah. Okay, that was the real quick on the data. It's 5:30. I still have everybody for 30 more minutes. Okay, jazakallah khair. All right, real quick, we're going to do high performing board. Right? If you raise your hand if you're on a board right now. A lot of board members, mashallah.
So be careful, bro.
All right. So, the title of this topic is individually volunteer, collectively aboard because mashallah, you're all volunteers. You're here on a Sunday. You could have been at home. You could have been at the beach. I mean, this is South Florida. You could have been having a nice steak, but you're right here because you, mashallah, are a good person with a good heart and you care and you want to make a difference, right? Collectively, you're a board. trying to do something amazing through some entity or vehicle, right? So here in the next few moments, I'm going to try to get through this in 10 minutes, and I'm moving fast because of time, but I'm still here also after Salah. If somebody wants to talk about this more, no problem, right? What does a high-performing board look like? If I had more time, I would have opened it up for questions and let you say. Does this feel like your board environment? Do you often feel like you're pulling donors, you're pulling other volunteers, you're pulling staff? That's kind of what it feels like as a board, right? Or does this, kind of feel like, or look like what a high-performing board should be? Right? Where everyone's kind of rowing and moving in the same direction, and everyone's sort of, they've got their skill set in how they're adding value to the organization.
Yeah, can we get a copy of this presentation?
Inshallah, we'll send it to
I
you.
don't have to try to memorize so much.
No problem.
Okay, that one.
You got it. Okay, for me, when I think about a high-performing board, for me, I see a high-performing organization. Right? If I see a high-performing organization, I know that what's behind that high-performing organization is a high-performing board. Right? So, what helps drive, right? When you go to different workshops, and I've been to so many board workshops, and you go to these board workshops and they talk about strategic plan, they talk about leadership, they talk about teamwork, right? And I've been on boards for 20 years now, alhamdulillah. And for me, through my own experience and my own research, what I find is that it boils down to one word, and that's power. The difference between proper and improper use of power is the difference between success and failure, high and low productivity, motivation and disillusionment. Power. Right? If power is displaced, then you'll have volunteers, employees, and donors. Those sort of centers of power will push and pull the organization. Without raising your hands, I can see it in your eyes. You've experienced it. That there's these sort of natural forces of power. And these powers push and pull the organization. Could be a group of donors. Could be a group of volunteers. Could be a group of parents in your Islamic school. Power. And this power, it just exists. And if it exists in the wrong way, it throws the board off. It throws the staff off. It throws the organization off. And then you as board members, all you're doing is dealing with the displacement of power. So it's not politics. It's the displacement of power. It's the displacement of power that derails an organization and prevents a nonprofit organization from highly performing and being successful. So, I can't see my notes, but what is power, right? What is power? Power is the ability to get things done. At the end of the day, that's all it is. Power is the ability to get things done. You're a board, that's all you want. The board wants things to get done. And if things get done, then the board doesn't have to worry about it. I was teaching a class, I won't say the city because you might know these people. I was teaching a class and it was with boards. This class in a 2-day format, practical workshops, okay? And one of the board members taking a phone call, he said, Brother Tayyab, I have to step out because there's a leak. There's a leak in our facility and I've got to go take care of it. I'm not saying that fixing a leak is beneath the board member. I'm just saying that the operational strategy is missing somewhere. Like that's an indication that we don't have what's called faces in the right places. Faces in the right places. That means I want Michael Jordan as a forward. I want Scottie Pippen. I want Bill Cartwright. Now I've aged myself, right? I'm a Bulls guy. Pistons? I'm sorry you guys didn't get a title at that time. Yeah, we're 3 brothers and 5 girls. My older brother is a Rockets fan, and my next older brother is a Celtics fan, and I was a Bulls fan, and so we would always rival in the house. So here's the thing. I'm moving through this fast, okay, guys, because of time. But when power rests with individuals, the institution is at the subjective use and potential abuse of power. I'm going to read that again. When power rests with an individual or a group of individuals, the institution is at the subjective use and potential abuse of power. Right? So now you're wondering, how do you solve this, Tayyab? Right? We get it. We might be living in this world. I'm going to give you a prescription, inshallah. Okay? High-performing boards focus on powering the institution. And I'm going to tell you 3 things that power the organization to get things done. That's what you want. And trust me, I've been to these leadership workshops when after 13 years of running my own global company, I went back and enrolled myself in an executive MBA program. And in my cohort were 35 executives from top Fortune 500 companies. And even then, they drove us through leadership workshops, training workshops, strategic planning, methodologies, organizational structure. But at the end of the day, we as board members, we just want that organization to achieve something amazing for the world. And that's why we're sacrificing time away from our families and from our children and a million other things we could be doing. Right? So when we talk about getting things done, it's about powering the organization. So if you're a board member here today, I want you to paradigm shift. And I want you to paradigm shift and focus on the question, how do I power my organization, this organization? How do we, the board, power this organization to get things done? Okay? And I'm going to give you those 3 things to draw that power. And that is, power is drawn from governance, operational leadership, and funding. These are the 3 areas of power to power your organization. And we, the board, we're not the power. We just want to power the organization. We want to build the plant that gives this thing juice for years and years and years and years before we check out. Right? So we're going to go through these 3. This is a 1-hour workshop. I'm doing it in like 15 minutes. You guys with me so far? You're bright people. You're the top of your professions. I know you are. You run schools, you run your clinics, you run your businesses. You're super bright people. I don't have to baby this stuff for you. Right? You're super bright people, mashallah. So let's talk about governance. Okay? If you go to Sheikh Google, there's a million definitions of governance. I'm going to make it simple for you. Right? When I think about governance, actually, this is what the image I wanted to show you is that the board powers the organization to grow and to achieve results. And I love this image because the green is sort of like good, social value versus economic value. And then you, the board, you're sort of building that framework, the resources, the structure to grow the organization, right? 3 things to power this thing. So when I think about governance, I want you, governance basically is the framework to guide the organization. And the ultimate example of governance is the ultimate institution, which is Islam. If you think about it, the Quran is a policy manual. That's what it is. And the Sunnah was the example of the policy proceduralized. Look, if your nonprofit does not have a governance system, then it means that your nonprofit is subject to the use and potential abuse of power, because power lies with individuals. For example, me, CEO of my company, okay, I got 500 employees. In the absence of policy, when there's conflict between two managers or two decisions, they have to call me. So if you are finding yourself as a board member sitting on conference calls all the time discussing dilemmas, then you are, as individuals, collectively the policymakers of that organization in the absence of a written policy to guide decision dilemmas. When I spent time and invested in a policy manual for my global company, now it runs on its own. The HR manager looks at policy. The operations manager looks at policy when there's a dilemma. The finance team looks at policy when there's a dilemma. Now, in the absence of policy, now managers need to find policy. So then where do they go? They come to the board. Then I say, okay, tell me the story, the situation, the circumstance. As they give me the case, then I think about long-term organizational direction and strategy, what matters, and I write new policy. And I say, this should guide you. This is what I want you to do with this current situation. This is how you put the fire out, but this is going to be the policy going forward. What I told you to do for the fire is not going to be policy. This is just to put the fire out. This is going to be policy to run the organization going forward. Right? So the ultimate example of policy was the Quran. Right? When you have written policy, then you've empowered the organization to move from being powered by people to being individually run to institutionally sustainable. Individually run to institutionally sustainable. Let's talk about some of those components of policy. And this was my slide where I was talking about the greatest example of a governance system. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically wrote the policy manual. And then He has the Sunnah. And the Sunnah is the example of how the Prophet ﷺ proceduralized policy in that entire environment, situation, and circumstance. And many ulama have taken, when they ran into situations over the last 1400 years, they're checking policy and looking for precedent from procedure to come up with new policy. Right? And that's how you want to make your organization sustainable forever. It's got to be powered by governance right away. Right? So let's talk about the areas of governance real quick. First of all, a governance system. I have an example of a governance system too, by the way. I want to show you so you don't panic. Okay? I had my team create a template for a governance template. Okay, if you need help with your governance system, we'll get you some help. The internet's going really slow. I'll share some screenshots about it later, inshallah. Don't want to kill the time. A governance system has a clear vision. By the way, a vision statement is not a paragraph. A vision statement is not a paragraph. A vision statement aligns everyone in your organization, your donors, your beneficiaries, all your stakeholders, and your staff. And the vision statement is the future state. Okay? We take from Quran and Sunnah, Allah's vision statement, Jannah. In one word, vision statement. As soon as I say Jannah, we all imagine the happy place. Okay, now I'm going to give you the best example. I teach a vision statement class. I work with boards on vision statements, and I'll tell you, some of these vision statements, people just on the board want to have one word on the statement just so they could show that they added value. Don't do that. Okay? One of the best examples of a vision statement, close your eyes for a second and I'm going to state it. You ready? We imagine a world without Alzheimer's. Did you imagine an awesome world? We all know somebody who's old, and we wonder if they have dementia, potentially Alzheimer's. This is the Alzheimer's Association. We imagine a world without Alzheimer's. There's another organization I'm working with, Future American Muslim Entrepreneurs. We imagine a future world where the Googles and the Facebooks were founded and led by American Muslims. That's a vision statement. You can immediately see it in your head. So when you're talking to a volunteer, or you're talking to a donor, or you're talking to an employee, right? Because we're trying to get buy-in all the time. We're trying to get people to subscribe, to sign up to the organization somehow. You got to start with that future world. Get them to dream again. Maybe we'll have some smiles again, right? Vision, right? Test your vision statement when you go home. If your 5-year-old child or grandchild is confused, your vision statement's messed up, right? Keep going, you're saying? Oh, we lost it. Okay, it's coming back. Purpose. Purpose is, why does the firm exist? Why do we exist? Many organizations, we suffer from mission creep. And the mission creep happens in the absence of vision and purpose. And mission creep happens when the organization is at the subjective abuse and potential abuse of power. Whoever those people are, folks, and they're good intentioned people. I'm telling you, I used to think when I was a lot younger, I'm just going to be vulnerable for a minute and be honest. I used to get upset at a lot of organizations' boards, and I used to be one of those disrespectful kids who used to say those uncles and those aunties, and I'm now always doing tawbah about that. You know, it happens when you get older, right? You figure things out. So now I stop saying uncles and aunties, and I use community builders. And when I see the young youth, I say, don't say uncles and aunties. They're community builders. They're giants whose shoulders you stand on, right? Number 2, they have good intentions. They were doing what they thought was best. And that matters, because innamal a'malu binniyah, right? So alhamdulillah, wherever your organization is, that's a good thing. Alhamdulillah. But we now have an obligation as leaders to get this boat moving in the right direction, right? To get this boat moving in the right direction. There's actually another class that I do, which is on the organization's life cycle stages. And there's a stage which is the entrepreneurial stage. The entrepreneurial stage is where you have a lot of passionate individuals with a lot of creative minds who really care. And the organization through the entrepreneurial stage does something like this. But then it hits a glass ceiling and it can't really grow anymore. And those entrepreneurs, they try so hard to get that budget to $1 million. They can't think about 10 million. They can't think about 20 million. Although if they were more effective with their thought and their strategy, 10 million and $20 million budgets would be very realistic, right? So what I'm driving at is, as a board, be very clear on your vision and your purpose, because that protects the integrity of the mission of the organization, and that's what's next. Well, policy. When I was at ISNA, the committee, the board said, we want to have a democratic debate at the ISNA convention, which they did. And I was the CEO, and I asked a simple question. I said, is there policy that directs the implementation of that request? Is there policy that says if we bring a Democrat, we have to bring a Republican also? Because if ISNA is claiming to be the voice of the American Muslim community, I have research that says there's a lot of Muslims that are not democratic. So I need policy to guide me. And some of you might have executive directors and imams who work for you, and if you're asking them to do things, you're going to get into a power struggle. You're going to get into a decision dilemma. And how you solve those decision dilemmas is guiding policy. The guiding policy. The guiding policy helps direct those things. So if ISNA had a policy that said, if you're going to invite a Democrat, invite a Republican. If you're going to invite a Republican, invite a Democrat, that's policy. But if there's written policy that said invite Democrats only or invite Republicans only, then that's policy also. But there was no policy. And so since there's no policy, what happens? The organization is at the subject, use, and potential abuse of power. Right? So you don't know why people want certain things to happen. Because maybe it looked good and it feels good, or who's it actually benefiting? Right? Policy guides the organization. Mission. Mission is, what are we working on right now? What are we trying to get done? It tells your audience what we aim to build. So, we imagine a world without Alzheimer's. Our mission is to find the cure. Okay? 5 years later, we imagine a world without Alzheimer's. Our mission is to deliver the prescription to all four corners of the world. You see how the mission changed? Mission is, what are you doing right now? By the way, when I teach my fundraising class, we're not going to get to fundraising unless some of you want to stay later, but when I teach my fundraising class, there's something called case for support. The case for support is how you answer the question that's in the donor's mind. Why should I care? It's framework to help you answer the question in the donor's mind. Why should I care? Oftentimes we go to donors with an expectation. You should give, it's a masjid. You should give, you'll get a house in Jannah. Or we go benefit based. You should give, we're helping 1,000 kids. We're doing this, come on, there's no other masjids. You need to give, brother, you always give. I see you raise your hand all the time. Versus answering the real question in their head, and that's why you see checks dropping. The same individuals who used to give 100,000, 200,000 are now giving 75, 50, 10, 2, and 5. And it's not donor fatigue because they're getting asked too many times. It's because what the academics say is donor abuse. Donor abuse is when you don't properly steward your donors. Stewarding your donors, the data is proven to say that they give more and more and more, and even up to 10 years guaranteed if you steward them right. So mission. Corporate strategy. Corporate strategy is part of your governance system. That's what the board does. Not operational strategy. So many board members I know, they're involved in building, the standard operating procedures for the cafeteria of a school. Right? Do you have a principal? Yes. The principal is the CEO. Your job as a board is to create policy. Policy says we need to have a clean cafeteria. We need to have halal food. Right? We need to have, A, B, C, D. That's policy. Then you hand that to your CEO, and your CEO has to operationalize that. If they don't have the resources, then they can come to the board and say, I'm unable to implement this. Either you don't know how, you're not competent, or you don't have the resources. Let's talk about which one it is. Right? Corporate strategy. Who do we serve? How do we serve them? And where is this boat? It's the flight plan, not the roadmap. Flight plan, not roadmap. Okay? For example, I'll give you a quick example. Actually, we're coming on 6. I won't give you the example. Budget. Because board members are their fiduciary duty, there's a legal responsibility, there's a fiduciary duty. You have to look at the numbers, and you got to take that serious. Numbers you got to take serious. When I walked into ISNA, there was 5 years of a budget gap. And we looked at the process. It was because the budget was being created, sent to the board, and the board, amazing, nice people, mashallah, good intentions, not looking at the budget, just approving it. So there was 5 years of budget deficit, right? Pay attention to your budgets. You as board members pay attention to it. Now, I don't mean you need to be a finance person, right? You don't have to be a finance guru. Paying attention to the budget means knowing your subject matter expertise, understanding that the numbers matter, and making sure the right eyes are on the numbers, and providing you with a professional recommendation. Okay? My wife, she had a car accident, and what do? I'm not trying to play neurosurgeon. I find the best neurosurgeon I can get my hands on, and I try to take her to him. And I try to find 3, because I want to get 3 opinions, because her neck is important to me. Your necks are important too, and I bet you mess up on that budget, you'll have your neck to the federal government. It's very serious. Budgets are very, very serious. But there's a simple way to do it, is what I'm trying to tell you. I'm not trying to scare tactic you into, go solve your budget problem. I'm just trying to say, have a process for the budgets, okay? The second area to power the organization is have competent operational leadership. If you don't have a Michael Jordan to run that organization's day to day, you're going to have a problem. You as boards, you need a CEO. Don't mess with the CEO. Get a good CEO, trust me. Someone who knows what they're doing. And there are good ones out there now, mashallah. Invest in a good champion. And I'll tell you, most organizations, there are CEO types. You have your CEO who's an entrepreneur, very resourceful, risk-taking. They'll get the organization going. You have CEOs that are CFO quality. They're finance background. They're strong in finance. This happens in Fortune 500 companies all the time. Then you have CEOs that are operation builders. They can build SOPs, standard operating procedures. So you as the board assess your organization and say, hey, where are we? And what type of leader do we need now? Where are we in the organizational life cycle? Do we need a builder? Do we need a sustainer? Do we need a system installer? Do we need a finance mindset? And bring that person on for 2 to 3 years, get it done. That's fine. So the second area where the board powers the organization, first was governance. You got to create a governance system. Second, hire and fire the CEO. And then get out of the way. Don't try to be managers. You're busy, successful people. Don't need to be worried about the plumbing in the building. Hire a really good executive director or CEO. Just trust me on that. And there are models for success there. And I can help you and coach you through how you build that out and how you find that person, inshallah. Third, fundraise. If we want a high-performing organization powered by the board, governance, hire and fire the CEO, money. I am on the board of the Center on Muslim Philanthropy. We have an executive director. Everywhere I go, I meet people. As soon as I walk away from meeting this person, his name is Zaid. I send Zaid a voice note on WhatsApp. And when I meet this brother, I'll say, hey, assalamu alaikum, and let's say our conversation goes to Center on Muslim Philanthropy. And let's say this conversation goes to, he's like, I'd like to know more. Maybe I would like to send my team to your classes, or I want to support your organization, right? There's some opportunity that came about from this natural conversation. That's what we board members do. We're always selling the organization, selling the idea. We're trying to get buy-in. So what we're doing is we're generating leads. So as soon as you generate a lead, I walk away from this brother, I send Zaid, I tell him, like, hey, Zaid's going to call you. Is that cool? You want him to send you an email or send you a text or call you? What works? And then I get permission. He says, hey, an email's fine. Now I say, okay, I'm going to let Zaid know. I send Zaid a voice note. Hey, I met brother so-and-so. He's from this organization. He's really interested, da-da-da-da. And here's his email. He's looking out for it. I think these are the possibilities, man. Let me know how I can support you. Because he's my CEO. I'm not going to go jump out in front. Right? So boards are generating leads. The other thing that he does is he has a fundraising strategy. In the fundraising strategy, he has major gifters. So he'll call me and say, hey, Tayyab, you're the president of the board. We've got 2 or 3 major gifters. I talked to your assistant. You're going to be in this area. Can I line up some appointments for you? First, I'm going to say, how'd you get intel on my schedule? No, I'm just kidding. Yes, inshallah, I will go set these appointments up, work with Sarah. My assistant's name is Sarah. I said, work with Sarah, set those meetings up, and then when I hit the ground, give me a playbook. Right? So now the executive director is giving me a playbook, right? I'm just a tactician now. That's a strong CEO, and a healthy board CEO executive director relationship is like that, right? This is an important concept. I'll stop in 5 minutes. It's called a board, not individuals with authority. There's this culture in the American Muslim community where the employees and the staff and the volunteers are like, oh, that's a board member. Oh, that's a board member. Or we call our staff and say, hey, can you do this? Can you do that? It's actually unethical. And we're creating dysfunction in that organization, right? So Zaid has a staff. If I start calling the staff and saying, can you do this, can you do that? That staff member is now in conflict. And I don't have line of sight to what he's directed this person to do. And if he's evaluating their performance, and I'm evaluating his performance, but I've intersected and started working with the employee, I've created conflict and chaos, right? I've put risk to that person's performance, risk to his performance, and risk to the organization. Now, if you have this dysfunction now, there's a transformational strategy you need to move from a managing board to a governance board. That's what I'm ultimately talking about. How do you move from a management board to a governing board? It's natural that you are a management board if you are, because most nonprofits, they start on the shoulders of the giants. And the board members do all the work. Right on my drive down right now, I got a text message. It's a number. I don't know who it is. Brother Tayyab, I got your number from your sister. We're meeting tomorrow at 10:30. Can you come? We're trying to open a new masjid in Lake Nona. Right? So that's what happens. Who's meeting? There's 5 or 6 of us. We've made ourselves the board. So those 5 or 6 brothers and sisters are going to carry it on their shoulders until they can get to a point that they can buy this land, rent some trailers, start salah, raise money, until they can get to a point to hire some imam at the lowest cost possible, and then ask the imam to be the CEO. And then, that's unless they get strategic. Unless they really get strategic. So if you're a management board, you need a transformational strategy to move from management to governance. And there's a prescription for that. There's a prescription for that. But I want you to know, starting from now, legally, you only have power when you are convened as a board together and you're going through the board's decision-making process. As an individual, you don't. But you'll get there, inshallah. Don't worry. You want me to stop or dynamics? I can quickly do this. Let's stop for Asr. It's okay. This is a good stopping point. Let's stop here. Jazakallah khair. I'm really sorry I was late. Inshallah, I live in Orlando, so we can schedule more of these in the future. Jazakumullah khair. And forgive me if I said something not correct, and I'm happy to work with you individually or talk about it some more, inshallah.
Brother Tayyab, that was fantastic. May Allah bless you. I hope you all enjoyed this. I was blown away. And I mean, I had like about 5 lightning flashes when